All righty, let's go ahead and get started today, everybody. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Jack Harrison. For perhaps any of those who don't know me, I'm the manager of our client success team here at Giveffect, and it's my pleasure to talk with you today about some important topics that essentially all of the nonprofit professionals we work with encounter around this time of year, right? And that's giving statements and end of year reporting. So if you haven't already, please do place your name and affiliation in the Zoom chat here. I do also have my lovely colleague Tara here today. She'll be monitoring the chat should any of you have questions throughout today's session. I will note we do have a dedicated Q&A here at the end of today's workshop. But feel free to ask those questions in the moment via the chat. I may tag them as we go. If not, of course, we'll be sure to cover them in that Q&A. Okay. Before we jump in, just a quick review of our agenda here for this afternoon. And now it looks like we've got both current Giveffect customers and folks who are interested in learning more about the platform, which is great, and about the topics of reporting and giving statements. For those of us who aren't familiar with Giveffect, I do just want to provide a quick couple of slides with an overview of our team at Giveffect before we jump into really the meat of our workshop here today. All right. Of course, like I said, just for anybody who didn't recall, right, we'll be talking about year-end reporting, just some examples that you can think about sharing with your board. We'll also, of course, talk about, giving statements, how you'll not only generate these, of course, alongside any tax receipts, but how you can perhaps customize these, whether you're sharing via email, direct mail, whether you're sharing it with all your donors, some of your donors. We'll cover lots of different scenarios here today. So hopefully some helpful information for all of you. And of course, like I said, we'll have that Q&A at the end. Okay. So if you haven't gathered this already, Giveffect is a technology platform solely for nonprofits of all stripes and sizes. As I'm sure all of you and your inboxes can attest, there are a bunch of different software and tools out there to serve the needs of nonprofits, and typically each with their own areas of specialty. For us at Giveffect, while this list here is certainly not exhaustive, there are just some. These are just some of the challenges nonprofits face where we strive to help. First, disconnectedness. We know that not all tools speak to each other, and most times you need to pay, right? Pay more in order to integrate any of these tools so that they do talk to each other more easily, if at all. Not only is this a hassle for tracking the data for your various contacts, donors, volunteers, and constituents, but at Giveffect, we know it's also a hassle in terms of the loss of time, right, for you and your colleagues. Not to mention the different logins to keep track of, and because these tools don't talk to each other, we're then having to manually upload and download files between those different tools. And then we all know inevitably there's going to be some time-consuming manipulations to those spreadsheets or files as we move back and forth between any of those tools. Those minutes and hours, I probably don't have to tell you guys, but those add up every day, every week, every month. On the data side of things, whether you have one software tool you're using or multiple, you likely have more than one person managing this data. And people enter or track information differently, which can create headaches. Or naturally, you have turnover, transition in terms of who even manages this data in the first place. This all can lead to disorganized information that can ultimately decrease the effectiveness of what your data can even tell you at the end of the day. And finally, the fact that a lot of the time you are entering in data manually, field by field, so much so that the tab button on your computer starts getting stuck, right? Those repetitive tasks can be a huge time suck for you and any of your team members that you work with. So where do we step in here at Giveffect? By being a cloud-based software, our team built from the ground up, we aren't a platform that slaps together different constituent pieces based on acquisitions. We are built to be a true all-in-one user-friendly system. With tools like workflow automation that can help eliminate those repetitive tasks and save you that time by having your data all in one place. Now, being an all-in-one system, whether it is, you see here, giving, event fundraising, volunteer management, email marketing, grants, direct mail, and more, Giveffect has the tools at your disposal. Whether you're an organization that needs tools across these areas, or you're perhaps a smaller team that doesn't hit all of these areas in your day-to-day. Giveffect can work for you because we don't want to be a platform that only works with what you're currently doing. Well, that's great, but we always want to have an eye towards growth and success for you and your nonprofit, so you can continually increase your mission. For example, we work with many teams right now that say didn't have a grant management tool, perhaps outside of an extremely organized or perhaps disorganized spreadsheet, or maybe even a smaller volunteer program where they never really needed a full software tool to manage those folks and those hours over time. Nonprofits we work with have ramped up these programs because the platform allows them to. And to be clear, it isn't just the platform that has these tools. It doesn't matter as much what tools you have in the toolbox if you still have to spend time manually manipulating your data or pulling complex reports. I know some of us feel like we have to have a degree in querying, perhaps based on the tools we're using. With Giveffect, it's our proprietary smart automation tool and technology that automates these processes and connects your data, actions, and tasks throughout the entire software suite. This is a major piece that helps give you and your you and your team members that time back in your day. And across the board here, as people interact with your organization by giving, volunteering, signing up for emails, and more, that is all going directly into your Giveffect CRM. And with one contact profile for any of your records, so that you do get that 360-degree view rather than a whole bunch of different silos of data points. So just with some introductory information there for folks, let's just go ahead and jump right into the workshop. First here, I want to talk about year-end reporting. Perhaps you can share with your board. I have just a few examples here for us today. One that as we grow each year more and more into online fundraising, one thing we always want to make sure we're taking advantage of is any recurring fundraising, that can really be a strong or perhaps a consistent funding stream for you and your team, right? Because not only are you grabbing those donors for the first time, but by giving over the days, weeks, months, years, you're continuing to build on that relationship. And just to even show you guys, I'll jump into our Giveffect system here. Right now, I am in what is called the reports tool within the platform. And what I want to pull up specifically is looking at one of our canned reports here, which, by the way, when we say canned at Giveffect, you can absolutely build on these via the advanced search. And so if you need to start to break out or segment your data in any number of ways, whether based on fundraising data, simple contact data, volunteering, and so on, again, it's all here for you to be able to see those cross currents of information so you can get as particular as possible. So for instance, if I were to pull up our annual comparison report here, I'm going to go ahead and just select to view the years 2021 and 2022. First, what we're seeing here, of course, is not just that calendar breakdown of how many gifts we've received, how much has been raised. You see we have our summary tables here, even broken out month by month, but we do provide those graphics for you here as well. You're even noticing perhaps by giving level. And in fact, what I also want to pull up here for you is the growth report, a bit similar and a bit different. Again, I'll show on a calendar year basis for 2021 and 2022. So again, with these graphics here, you're seeing, for example, not just, again, how much you've raised over each time period, but even broken down into those individual giving levels, say under $100, between $100 and $250, and so on. When we are reporting to our board, of course, there may already be certain reports or requirements that they want you to send their way. But in terms of talking about recurring revenue, again, because all of these pieces are here already within the full suite, it can be extremely easy to simply isolate those gifts. And so as I go to our advanced search filter here, right, I could tell the system to show me all payments in the system where recurring is true. And so now, rather than just kind of seeing that perhaps vague or slightly opaque overall fundraising on a year-by-year basis, now I can have that be adjusted to just look at the revenue growth from recurring gifts alone. And I'm really just using, recurring gifts as an example because the point is, a lot of times folks may have data that can be helpful in terms of reporting to your board, in terms of your different funding streams, but it may just be simply too complex or too disorganized, going back to your data, so that you're actually able to see this picture in the first place. And so I just want to point out here with you today how easy that can be as we look within the Giveffect platform here. And again, not only focusing just on recurring, but I'd really advocate, if you guys aren't doing this already, to look at other items such as fundraising over specific events you're doing year by year. You may start to see trends on which of your events are bringing in those funds. What kind of donors are you attracting with those events? Perhaps for one, you're getting more new donors, whereas with another, you're perhaps getting some more of those high dollar donors, we may call them. The point is, as we're getting back to our board, we want to make sure that we're providing as much color with the data as possible, so that everyone can be on the same page and know what kind of decisions may be best for the organization moving forward. Another example here is looking at your peer-to-peer fundraising. Now, again, this can be a place where with any of the tools you're currently using, this may be, again, an entirely separate broken out tool, so that when you get to your database crunching and reporting at the end of the day, that's an entirely different tool. Not the case with Giveffect. And so just some of the things you'd want to make sure you're looking at in tracking this peer-to-peer fundraising is start to take a look at how effective are we at bringing in those new donors to your organization. It's not just the gifts at the end of the day, right? It's expanding your donor pool, and particularly through peer-to-peer, of course, right? We're asking folks to engage their friends, their family, their social circles, any way that they're expanding that reach. And so by way of Giveffect Smart Automation, right, all that information is going right into your database. And so you can even run reports, like I'll pull up in a moment here, what we call our participant summary. So you can see perhaps that reach that you're getting, or at least in this case, seeing out of all your different fundraisers, who's the most successful. Let me pull this up for us here. I'll stay in our same reports tab area, and you notice there's dozens of different reports here that can all be specialized. But I want to have us look at that participant summary here. And I'll pull up this example for a Bowl for Kids' Sake 2022. So again, not only here are we seeing how many participants we had in this campaign, number of donations, how much was raised, even metrics like average donation size. As I scroll down here, we're now seeing across all of our participants, right, AKA our peer-to-peer fundraisers through the campaign, we're seeing not only what their goal was, if they established one, but how much they actually raised, who is meeting their goal. This, of course, will allow you to see in future events who you may want to target to be those consistent fundraisers. As you see how much they've raised, maybe that's a way that as you leverage this relationship with them, that you ask them to increase their goal based off of previous success. Keep raising that bar, engage that competitive spark that most of these folks have, so you can continue to grow in terms of success for your overall campaign. And again, not just for your peer-to-peer purposes, but a lot of folks nowadays still, again, even though it's growing year by year, I see a lot of teams don't make a lot of use in terms of third-party fundraising. Now, again, that could be just by virtue of the kind of tools your team has or doesn't have. Maybe you just simply don't have those capabilities at the moment. In terms of how this works at Giveffect, that is a built-in part of the platform. And so again, not only do we want to think about your typical peer-to-peer programs, let's say over the course of the year, but as you identify those top fundraisers, ask them if they may be interested, let's say come around their birthday or any other special events in their life, or even just a season of the year that runs in congruence with one of your typical seasonal events. Again, have them raise those funds, at least make the ask, right? And so with Giveffect, you have that data at your fingertips to be able to make that ask in at least an educated way. Not only do you know that they've given or that they've fundraised for you, but we're even seeing how successful or not perhaps they were. All right, when we think about these peer-to-peer campaigns. Lastly here today, I want to talk about another item here in terms of major donor cultivation and conversion. What I want to raise here specifically on the Giveffect side is we do have our major gifts tool built directly in to the CRM. And so now you can see here, as I have pulled up in our system within our central CRM tab, we have this major gifts tool. And whether now, let me take a step back for a moment to say that whether it's through Giveffect's integration for wealth screening with donor search, or by simply identifying new donors as they give to your organization, you could also use Giveffect's major gifts tool to track your appeals of any size. I know we call the tab major gifts, but this can be for gifts of any size, right? It can be an easier way for you to track these relationships, not just the ask in terms of the communication that you sent, perhaps it was via email or a direct mail appeal. But by essentially having a vehicle to be able to track each of these different donor relationships over time. And so when we think about ramping up, say, a major gifts program for the first time, it's a tool like this that can allow you to see those conversion rates, because as you're adding any of these opportunities, one thing I'll point out is you're managing these opportunities across various stages of not just identifying these donors in the first place, which again goes back to how you can use your data in Giveffect to see maybe it's first-time donors, maybe it's donors who have cumulatively given over a certain amount in a given calendar year or fiscal year, perhaps. Point being, as you identify these folks and start to cultivate these relationships, you can have these built-in tools so that at the end of the day you can see, for instance, how many do we now have at that stewardship level where we have received gifts and we're stewarding that relationship, versus perhaps folks where it wasn't as successful. Use this information to understand where maybe you can continue to improve in terms of your processes or workflows in place as you are reaching out to any of these potential donors over time. And lastly, what I want to point out here is, again, with teams of all varying sizes, sometimes you'll have multiple different giving managers with their own specific portfolio. What's nice, at least specifically here at Giveffect, is any of your users listed within the system have their own built-in portfolios here, so that as you create those opportunities, it's very easy for any of them to log in and pull up to see what any of their potential donors are doing at a given point in time. So it's not like everyone is going through this data, and it's, again, we're wanting to avoid any disorganization, okay, at the end of the day. So moving forward here, away from year-end reporting for the board, let's shift gears and start looking at giving statements. And there's a couple of things I want to make sure are pointed out here. First, before we even think about how to generate these statements or what we might want to include, what I would advocate for each of your teams to do, if you're not already, is to start determining and have that formal process in place of what giving information you even want to convey to your donors. Perhaps you want to convey the specific event that they're giving to, or any other number of metrics. And perhaps it even differs across your different pools of donors. This customization can be key so that you are as responsive as possible to the ways that they're engaging with your organization. As we take a peek here within Giveffect, we even have our own built-in statements tool. I know a lot of times the tools that people are using, it's not a built-in process. You're having to pull that spreadsheet out of your database, and perhaps you're getting out that trusty Word doc, right? And typing those, let's say it's whether those letters or perhaps email verbiage, person by person. By having this tool within the system, you're eliminating, again, that time in your day or over the course of the week as we're here in this important time of year and giving our important donors that critical tax and giving information. What you can do here within Giveffect is, I want to go over here in our left-hand navigation bar, because one of the tools we offer is this annual statement template, okay? And a few different things with this, when we think about customizing the information that you have, is not only, of course, is the message body that goes in that template, will you be able to input here and adjust to your liking? You're also even seeing layout options in terms of having a windowed envelope formatting to your document. So if you are going ahead and generating these via direct mail and sending this off, it's going to align, again, the formatting of that document as easy as possible so that once you get to folding and stuffing into those envelopes, that is already taken care of. You have different formatting options here available. Even you're seeing here, something a lot of tools may not have, are what we call replacement variables, or you may know of as merge fields, so that it's, again, when we think about customization, it's specific to each person as we generate their documents, right? Not just their name and address, basic information like that, but if we want to go ahead and list explicitly that giving summary, right? It's a big piece whenever we think about acknowledging these donors to be specific and know that we understand how much they're supporting your organization and how much it's appreciated, no matter the amount. You can also apply signature blocks here for any perhaps staff members where you need to provide that signature on the document itself. And then one piece here to harp on for a moment is, let me go ahead and just pull up a preview of what these documents can look like, because this is where, when we think about the summary table of information you may want to share, we have this description field. And again, the values you may want to communicate to your donors may differ, okay? And so rather than having some static list of options that are the same for every single person, what you're able to do is to come to this description area and say, okay, do I want to share with these donors in terms of their giving statements, which campaign they gave to with each transaction? Or maybe there are certain, because there are in-kind items, certain in-kind descriptions I want to make sure are broken out so that for each of these line items, again, we're being as explicit as possible and folks know that we have a full accounting of all the different ways that they've supported your organization. Getting back to the peer-to-peer side of things, perhaps, again, this is where we want to have listed which specific team they gave to, or if this was a gift via sponsorship for one of your events, which tier was that a part of? Again, you could use these checkboxes here within Giveffect to customize this for your overall template. So when we get to generating these documents at the end of the day, again, it's as specific as possible to meet you and your donors' needs, or perhaps even requests. Okay. As we think about, before we think about generating, just a couple other items I want to communicate for folks here today is, since January and Q1 is in general a prime giving statement season, your donors are preparing for their tax filing in April, right? I'm sure many of you may have donors who are calling you up and asking for these documents. If your data is a mess or record keeping has been inconsistent over the course of the year, this can certainly present problems and headaches. With Giveffect, that built-in statements tool I was showing you is an extremely easy way to create your own statements using that template we just discussed, to still customize and send that information to the donors that you're managing. I'll also note with the Giveffect platform that folks also can create their own Giveffect supporter account, so that without having to call you and request those documents, they can't even just go to their web browser, log into their account, and not only see their giving history, but pull up those tax documents themselves and save you that time. Again, putting it back in your day, so you can be as effective for your colleagues and for your organization as a whole. Okay. And then final item for us today, we're at the point now of actually generating those statements and those receipts. When we think about, first thing I always advocate folks do is to determine your policy on which documents to send. What exactly do I mean by this? Based on the bandwidth or knowledge of your team, you need to determine what's a feasible policy for handling these giving statements. You want to be asking yourself some of these kinds of questions. Are you going to be generating and doling out these statements only for donors who request them? Are you going to be doing this for donors over a certain cumulative giving amount? Will you be generating these to send off via direct mail, via email, or perhaps both? This is a really important process because, again, when we think about transition, turnover, in building those formal processes year over year, it will not only help you in your current role, but anybody else who will be serving your organization so that they don't have to start from the ground up, recreate the wheel, and go through any of those similar headaches you may have had to, unfortunately, experience over your time. Once you've determined that policy, and again, one thing with Giveffect is that since this is a built-in tool and that time is put back into your day, you may decide you're actually able to send out these statements automatically to all of your donors rather than only by request, because that's how much time you're able to dedicate with those processes. The second piece here that's extremely important is to, if you're not going to just carte blanche send these statements to all of your donors, I imagine you may not even want to do that, is really think about who you want to identify in your donor pool and how you're going to query to get there. Coming back over here to the system, I want to jump into our statements tab within the CRM, because not only is this an area where you can generate these documents, but you can still easily pull these querying tools to think about the different groupings you may have. So let me pull up the statements tab here for us. And just so we take a closer look at the tool here together, you're even seeing you have lots of different options in terms of time periods to generate these giving statements for. Are we looking on a calendar year basis? Maybe we're looking at a fiscal year, if that differs, of course, from your calendar year. You may even want to see based on lifetime giving for any of these statements as donors request them. These are all options you have specifically within the Giveffect platform. And then, of course, we're just choosing which year do we want to be working off of. For today's sake, I'll go ahead. We'll just go with calendar year 2022. And so now Giveffect is going to show me all of the donors who have given at least once over this time period and therefore have a statement. And so we can see for these 166 donors, all their statements over here on the right-hand side, already ready to go. They're already prepared, right? Remember, we just saw a moment ago how we can create those templates. Now these statements are already prepared. There's no other extra steps we need to take other than sending them out, whether direct mail or email. Now, before we get into actually generating these pieces, let me pull up this advanced search tool, because again, really think about who you're wanting to target. Maybe it's folks who have gifts over a certain amount. And so we think about a filter such as donation amount, and we add those parameters here. Maybe it's you have different contact groupings based off the kinds of activities that folks are engaging in for your organization, and they fall into these buckets that you tag over time. This can be an easy way, even aside from running these complex reports in the moment, to know who these donors are in the first place, right? Maybe just in this instance, we want to target everyone who's listed as a $100,000 and over donor. Now, maybe that's a high ceiling for some folks' cases, but let's just see what it returns us today. Great, we have a few dozen here in this case in particular. As I'm mentioning this, I'm just trying to demonstrate to you guys how easy it can be within the tools perhaps that you have, or at least within Giveffect, to pull up these different segmentations and groupings. Again, rather than running your complex report, getting down that spreadsheet and tallying any of those numbers piece by piece or row by row over time. Okay. So because Giveffect's annual statements tool and customizable template allow you to craft your verbiage and generate your documents with ease, like I said, via email, direct mail, or both, you're saving your team that time. And again, not having to pull out that Word doc. I'm sure, one thing I also want to mention here is I'm sure many of you all are sending your thank you notes to your donors right after the donation was gifted. And ideally, you had that automated like many nonprofits do here with us at Giveffect. You may also want to send a letter alongside your statement to once again, perhaps more greatly express your appreciation for your donors and provide additional information about your nonprofit. Through Giveffect's mail templates, you can also craft these messages within the platform. Let's go ahead and generate some of those here today. First, I want to point out, if you're going to do this on an individual basis, you certainly can. We can go to this drop-down arrow for this particular statement document, and we can see whether we want to shoot it off via email or go ahead and download that PDF to our device with or without those tax receipts. This is another important component. A lot of the times, teams I've dealt with when they're coming from their previous tools is they can generate the statement and they can generate the receipts, but they can't perhaps easily combine them together, or because it could perhaps take time to generate all those different receipts and slap them all together, it's just not worth, the juice is not worth the squeeze at the end of the day. And so again, this is another built-in tool within the platform where you don't have to worry about assembling those pieces yourself. But instead of doing it one by one, I imagine you guys want to send this to multiple contacts at the same time. Again, we want to be efficient with our time. So once we select all of our results in the group, through Giveffect, you have your print selected tool where you could just go directly to generating your annual statements. You're even seeing here, coming back to whether, I'll zoom in here, whether we want to include receipts, what address data we want the system to use in terms of having that flexibility. So that as I now generate these, one click, and I'm done. Now all I have to do is go and download and print off those documents here at the printer at the office, right? While that's loading, I also want to point out, I mentioned how you may want to have an entirely separate thank you letter that precedes that statement document. How can I pull that up? Back to my same drop-down arrow, back to print selected, and this pulls up any of the letter templates I've created within the Giveffect platform. So again, as I select this option, I can now say, do I want to include the statement? Do I also want to include each of those individually broken out tax receipts? Again, we're looking here at as much customization as possible and ease in generating these documents for larger pools of donors at a time. All right, let's come back over here to these generated documents. So again, we're seeing, here's Jack here at the top. Here's how much he's given over the calendar year. Here are each of those line by line items. Notice, I didn't reference this earlier, but it's even breaking out those non-tax deductible versus tax deductible amounts. So again, you're not having to do those calculations. It's absolutely built in. And then here is a case where we have all those individual receipts to coincide with this document, so that instead of pulling it multiple times for any of your donors, you pull it the one time, send it off, and they have everything they need come the tax season. Okay. And then lastly here, we've talked about direct mail, but it's from this very same area. Or in fact, we'll just scroll down to the bottom of the page where we can send that mass email to all donors in the list. So again, you can see just in a matter of a few minutes, not only have I customized my template, generated my document, I'm now already at the point where I can send these via mass email or mass generate these direct mail letters. And again, in a matter of minutes, I'm not having to spend those days and weeks crunching through all those different steps. I've drastically reduced that time that I need over these different workflows. Okay. We've now moved into the Q&A portion of today's workshop. Let's see here if we already have any questions that have been peppered in here. Let's see. Okay, so okay, we've got one here. Let me just pull this up. Looking at what about statements for let's see here. Perhaps you have multiple donors under the same roof, right? Maybe we have a husband and wife, spouses, different family members. We certainly want to save that paper and not generate time, or excuse me, have to generate multiple documents for each individual donor in that group. That's a great question. This is where we want to pull up here. You actually have Giveffect's households tool, where you can automatically group these contact members into these household groupings, so that now, not even going anywhere extra for the moment, I'm staying here in my statements tab. I have my group households button right here in the top right. And so as I regenerate this list, all of the documents, if any of these folks are in fact in a household, that information will also be listed within these documents. So a good question. You don't have to do this multiple times, perhaps for donors with the same address, just generate it the one time to get a full comprehensive giving history for everyone within that household. All right, any other questions here? Let me see. We've got one here. Okay, is there a way to send a mass email to all donors on file that we have emails for, and then see a list of any donors that are left, so that we do not have folks who we don't have emails for, we can then use direct mail? Another great question. This gets right back to how you can use the advanced search tools present within the platform. In this case, I'd want to pull up here, getting into our filter dropdown. Contact email is present or is blank. Really easy parameter we can throw in there. So if I want to identify and isolate the folks who don't have emails, I'll simply run that filter email as blank. And now I very easily have this list. You could even do the same thing if you wanted to run it in reverse. Maybe we're thinking, I want to identify folks who I have good address data for first. Same thing, rather than pulling email, I could pull something like the address street filter. So for any contacts where a street filter, or excuse me, a street value is present, you can absolutely pull these at the drop of a hat right here within your statements tab, as you then think about segmenting these different donors. And one thing, just so you're not doing this year over year, if that's a process you're going to always have in place, remember that you can always save these queries, give it a name, so that not only just for yourself or for any future team members or colleagues that you have, they'll be able to pull those same queries within the platform without having to, again, recreate that wheel. Okay. Let me see any other questions here. All right. Looks like we've got one more here today. Will the statement list any items outside of regular donations? Maybe you guys are selling tickets or raffles, perhaps, for certain events. Absolutely, absolutely. When it comes to Giveffect, as you're generating these statements, any payments whatsoever that have any tax deductible amount, these are going to be automatically referenced within these statements, so you're not having to generate, again, separate documents at the end of the day. All of those different types will automatically be included as you generate these here within the platform. Okay. Oh, and actually, it looks like one more came in here. If our donors have an email on file, but I've selected not to receive emails, will they still get their statement by email? That's a good question. If you were to say, not even think about querying that option, maybe you want to scroll back down to the bottom of the page. Let me go ahead and just refresh here for us. If you explicitly say to send that mass email to those donors, they will receive it. Now, to get around that, this gets back to how you query and identify your donor pools in the first place, is you have filters for this as well. What we're referring to here is you have different opt-in fields or communication preferences for any of the records in your CRM. And so in this case, I'd want to pull up the email opt-in field. So if you want to make sure you're honoring the preferences of any of your donors, pull this up ahead of time. And so maybe we, in this case, we'd want to say, right, show me everyone where email opt-in is true. That way, anybody whose preference is to not receive those emails, we can very easily eliminate them from the list and then get right back to our mass sending without having to worry about bothering any of our donors based on what they prefer. Okay, and then another one here. Can we use the CRM in conjunction with Salesforce or Razor's Edge? No, because we are a full 10-in-1 platform. We are meant to be a full replacement to those different tools. For anybody who's perhaps interested in learning more, certainly feel free to contact our team, whether via support@giveffect.com or perhaps contact@giveffect.com as well. But we I'll even reference here, we do have a number of our current customers who are coming from these other tools. Razor's Edge is in fact one of our highest conversions. But to answer that question, no, this is meant to be that standalone tool. Okay, and another one, appreciate all the questions here from folks today. Let's see, what happens if you choose to send via mass email, but there's no email address for the donor? Will the system let you know who is not being sent to? It's a good question. It will not, it'll simply just not include them in the list. But that's why I'd really advocate to really get ahead of that in the first place. So you can already know without having to guess or have the system flag for you. And again, save these queries because you may forget these different parameters you're wanting to add, but add those on the front end before we think about generating. So you're not perhaps inadvertently thinking folks are receiving these documents when they in fact are not. Another good question. Okay. Any last questions? For anyone who's still on, I very much appreciate your time this afternoon. I'll stay for just another minute or two in case there are any stragglers with questions. But if not, again, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Friday. I appreciate you all reaching out. Just one final thing I'll mention again, for any of our current Giveffect customers, if you have additional questions after this workshop today, contact us at support@giveffect.com. And if you're interested in learning more about Giveffect, you're not already a partner with us on the platform. Let me get that out of the way, excuse me. You can certainly contact team members like Yulia at yulia@giveffect.com or visit our website, giveffect.com, to schedule a free demonstration with one of our team members. We'd be happy to discuss your needs, your wants, and how we can perhaps best serve you and your nonprofit's mission. All right. Thanks again, everyone. Have a wonderful Friday and into the weekend. Hope to see you next time.